Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. My name is Bradley Clary, and on this channel we discuss core doctrine of Christianity and how we should live in light of the good news of the gospel. Today we are going to be continuing our Bible summary series by picking up where we left off. Today we are going to be summarizing Genesis 12, specifically looking at key events and themes of this chapter. Last video we discussed historical context, the relation to the Bible Genesis 12 has, and the promises to Abraham this chapter holds. Genesis 12 is interpreted as a pivotal call to faith, highlighting God's covenant promise to Abraham and a model for trusting God's plan even when it requires leaving the familiar for an unknown future, emphasizing that God's power works through human obedience and imperfect faith. Interpretations vary, focusing on themes of spiritual journey, mission work, the development of faith through trials, and the universal scope of God's blessing through one family. Interpretations center on this call to a faith journey, developing into missionary purpose, and showing God's works through human reliance and imperfect steps, despite famines or fears, to establish his kingdom. Covenant and calling. God initiates a unique relationship, calling Abram, later Abraham, to leave Ur, his homeland and family, for an unnamed land God will show him, establishing a lineage and a future nation. Faith and trust. It's a call to radical trust and obedience, requiring Abram to step into uncertainty, demonstrating that God's plan unfolds through human willingness to follow, even when details are unknown. Grace versus works. Martin Luther saw this passage as proof of grace, highlighting Abraham's past idolatry and emphasizing God's gracious choice over human merit, human failure, and God's faithfulness. The narrative also showcases Abraham's human failings, like in Egypt, showing God's unwavering faithfulness despite personal weaknesses, a theme explored throughout Genesis. Purpose over privilege. The blessing isn't for personal comfort, but for a public responsibility to bring blessing to all nations, making Abraham the channel for God's global purposes. Development of faith. The narrative from Genesis 12 to 50 shows faith developing through trials, like famine in Canaan, and imperfect responses, like fear or deception, revealing God's faithfulness despite human frailty. Universal scope. The promise, "In you all families of the earth shall be blessed," points beyond physical Israel to a spiritual nation, believers from all nations, and ultimately to Christ, fulfilling the global mission. Lastly, the spiritual journey. It serves as a pattern for the believer's life, leaving the familiar to follow God's leading, depending on His provision and power, and moving towards God's redemptive plan for humanity. Those are some of the main themes of this chapter. Let's take a look at some of the lessons we can learn. 1. God's call and leaving the familiar. God called Abram to leave his country, relatives, and father's household for a new land, emphasizing a radical step of faith into the unknown. Faithfulness in the unknown. Trusting God requires you to take one step at a time, even without knowing the full future, knowing God is with you. 3. Blessed to be a blessing. God promises to make Abram a great nation and bless all peoples through him, showing that blessings are meant to be shared. Worship and acknowledgement. Building altars like Abram did signifies acknowledging God at every stage of the journey and keeping him central. 5. Challenges and famine. God's promises don't eliminate trials. Famine occurs, testing faith and forcing reliance on God. Consequence of fear. Number 6. Fear led Abram to lie about Sarah in Egypt, showing how poor choices can arise from fear. Though God's grace is available for correction. 7. God's sovereignty and intervention. God's power is shown in protecting Sarai and his people, even when they stumble, demonstrating he works to fulfill his purposes. 8. Perseverance. Abram's journey teaches patience and endurance, reminding us that setbacks aren't the end, and God's timing is ultimate. Finally, 9. God's greater story. Abram's individual story laid the foundation for God's plan for Israel and the world, culminating in Jesus. That's all for now. Join me in our next video, as we'll be taking a look at Genesis 13. Thank you all for watching another video, and as always, keep on living in light of the good news of the gospel. If y'all like that video and would like to help me reach more people with the gospel, click that sub button and join the team, and also please consider becoming a patron on my Patreon account, link in description, and I'll see y'all in the next video. Bye.